Well, guys, right away, as you look at the picture of Carlo Acutis, you can tell that there's a difference between him and Rolando Rivi, whom we saw yesterday. The most striking difference is this is a color photograph. And that tells you Carlo lived closer to us in time. Rolando died in 1945. Photography was generally black and white. But now you can see Carlo Acutis, and you see he's in color, snapshots of him, showing him as being a very modern boy. And in fact, he was born in 1991. So he would only be 29 years old if he were alive today. But he died at the early age of 15 in 2006. That's going to make him one of the youngest saints who didn't die a martyr in our church calendar, in our church history. So Carlo was so strikingly filled with Christ that even only 14 years after his death, he's about to be named blessed. So that means that there are people all over the world who are just so taken with him and so convinced that Jesus can be seen in his life, that all of the procedures for sainthood have moved along this quickly. Carlo, his name, of course, means Charles or Charlie, was born in London. His parents were Italian, but they were living in London because that's where his dad was working. A few months after Carlo was born, the family moved to Milan, and he began to go to school, elementary school, with the Marcelline sisters. When he was with the sisters, and they began to teach him catechism, he really fell in love with God. He fell in love with Jesus. And although his parents weren't really very much practicing Catholics, he asked them to let him make his first communion with the rest of his class at the age of 7. And so just like us, he made his first communion. And from that moment on, his love for Jesus in the Eucharist, in Holy Communion, just exploded. He asked his mom and dad for permission to go to Mass every day before school. And he kept up going to Mass until his last illness, every day of his life. Eventually, he would say, the Holy Eucharist is my highway to heaven. The word for highway in Italian is autostrada. And the Italian autostrada is very big, very direct, and very fast. When I was a student in Rome, we often traveled on the autostrada during holidays from one part of Italy to another. So for Carlo to say that Holy Communion was his highway to heaven was an image that must have meant speed and power and a direct route. When he began receiving communion, he also decided that he wanted to become an altar server. And so he started serving Mass, and he began praying the rosary every day. And the saints who were his favorites at that time were Francisco and Jacinta Marto, the children of Fatima, St. Dominic Savio, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, and St. Tarcisius. With the exception of Jacinta, these were all boy saints, saints who became holy and who became friends of God while they were quite young. And they were his heroes. But he had a very ordinary life. He continued on in school. He went on to junior high and then to high school at a Jesuit school. He loved to play, and he was fascinated by computers. He had a great talent for using the computer and the internet. And this was really his special gift. Carlo didn't live long enough to have a family or become a priest or become a doctor and heal people. Instead, his whole life was very brief. But what he did do was he used the internet for study and for learning about his faith. And he came up with the idea of creating an internet site on all the miracles associated with the Holy Eucharist over the centuries. He had read about them, he'd seen books, but he knew that young people would want to see these testimonies to God's power in the world on the internet. So he started off by doing this as a project through school. And then later, the boards from his Eucharistic miracles display would travel from one parish to the next, were photographed and went online. And today, only 14 years after his death, they have been seen on all 5 continents. They've been reproduced, printed up, and visited over 10,000 parish churches in the United States. And they have been shown at the great shrines of Fatima and Lourdes and Guadalupe. In 2006, he became ill with a form of leukemia. And it was the leukemia that brought him to his death later that year on the 12th of October after a 3-day illness and hospitalization. And faithful to the example of the saints that he had read about and learned about, he offered his life for the Holy Father and for the Church. That was amazing. He died in great peace and great trust in God that he was going to go straight to heaven. Since his death, there are over 200 websites and blogs that have talked about him. Conversions are accredited to him. His parents received letters and requests for prayer almost every day from all over the world. One of the extraordinary things was about Carlo and his love for his family, because he was always very close to his mom and dad, is that dying, he knew that he was going to leave them without a son. He had no brothers and sisters. But in an almost extraordinary, miraculous way, 4 years after he died, Carlo's mom became pregnant again, and she gave birth to twins on his very birthday, on the anniversary of his death. So Carlo seemed to send this gift to her from heaven. In 2016, 10 years after his death, the Cardinal Archbishop of Milan completed the process for his sainthood. People were so eager to recognize Carlo as a saint, a special friend of God, that they started the process only 7 years after his death. And in 2018, Pope Francis declared him a true hero of our faith and gave him the title Venerable. Venerable is a word that people use outside of the church to mean something old and very worthy. But Carlo is forever young, forever worthy of our attention. And this year, just before COVID, the Holy Father announced that Carlo was going to be beatified, that the miracle for his beatification had been approved. His body is buried in Assisi, which is a long way from Milan, but Carlo loved Assisi. He had visited there with his parents while he was living, and he loved the example of St. Francis. Like Francis, he wanted to be a universal friend. He wanted to offer himself to the world to bring the world closer to Jesus. And so his gift has been to establish friendships and contact. Now, for you guys living in today's world, he's really an attractive friend. He says things in ways that we can understand. If we get in front of the sun, we get suntans. But if we get in front of Jesus in the Eucharist, we become saints. What could be more simple, more direct? and more obvious than that. This is the way that he talks. This is the way he spoke to people. And so in Carlo, we have a great teacher. You can see all these marvelous photos and posters that are on the web that Deacon Richard has arranged to put up for you. I hope that as time goes on, you'll find more of them on your own. You can look up the Carlo Acutis site and see what he's been able to do for people. Just as yesterday I told you about how Rolando brought about this reconciliation between a family member of the man who killed him and his own family, so Carlo seems to be doing the same kind of thing, not among enemies, but making strangers friends, treating people, drawing people closer and closer to Jesus, inviting them to take up this challenge that he discovered of becoming a friend of Christ, and a true member of his church by bringing friendship with Jesus to those who do not yet know him. That was his great gift. And it's one that I think is really attractive, really powerful, and can do a lot of good, an awful lot of good for each of us, for each one of you. There are quotes from Carlo Acutis that you can find on the web that are really quite remarkable, in which he speaks about his love for the rosary and his love for the church and for the saints, and the way in which our Lord spoke to him and revealed to him how to follow Christ, how to come ever closer to him. Our aim has to be the infinite and not the finite. The finite means something that has an end. The infinite is our homeland, heaven. We've always been expected in heaven. We've always been expected in heaven. The way in which he did this was really ordinary. He went to Mass every day. He went to school. He played with his friends. He hung out with them. He liked his computer games, but he only allowed himself an hour a week. That's really heroic, isn't it? I'll bet it's tough for you, some of you guys, to play computer games only for an hour a day. But Carlo had this real sense of everything being proper, everything being proportionate, doing the right things in the right way at the right time. He said, the more Eucharist we receive, the more we'll become like Jesus, so that on this earth we'll have a foretaste of heaven. So that's why he got up every morning early. He went to Mass. He had received Holy Communion. He said, that's my life's plan, always to be close to Jesus. And that's what he did. Whether he was praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, working on his websites, or going to school like everybody else. His mom said he had a very great compassion for people who were suffering. She said his immense generosity made him interested in everyone, foreigners, the handicapped, children, beggars on the street. To be close to Carlo was to be close to a fountain of fresh water. He understood the true value of life as a gift from God, as an effort, an answer to be given to Jesus day by day in simplicity. He was a normal boy, she said. He was joyful, serene, sincere, and helpful, and he loved being with people. He loved having friends. One of the sentences that Carlo spoke that you often see on posters is one that I think is really remarkable, and it shows how immersed he was in media and the world. He said, all people are born as originals, but many die as photocopies. What does that mean? Well, to be original means to be the way God made you, to be unique, to be one of a kind. But as we grow up, especially boys, we boys, trying to figure out how to be good men, we look at other people, we copy things. We look up to our dad, maybe an uncle, maybe an elder brother. If you get involved in sports at school, oftentimes boys look up to their coaches, and coaches can be really good leaders. Father Hamilton can tell you about that, I'm sure, because of his basketball career. So we look for role models and examples, but even the best role models are meant to be inspirations to us, but we're not supposed to duplicate everything about them. Carlo wanted to be himself. He wanted to be his own man, his own person. He wanted to be guided by Christ and look at him and see him as the best model. He didn't need to do what everybody else was doing or conform to what everybody else was doing. He could figure it out for himself with the help of his good parents and his priest at church, his teachers at school. But he didn't want to be just a photocopy of anyone else. He wanted to be the unique person Christ created him to be. And that, I think, is really important for you guys to think about. What is unique about you? You each have talents, you have gifts, you have interests, you have a genetic legacy from your family, from your mom and dad. Some of you are tall, some of you are short, some of you are broad, some of you are skinny, some of you are runners, some of you are swimmers, some of you might turn out to be football players. We're all different. Our bodies are different, our minds are different, but we have a common vocation to belong to Jesus, like Rolando, to be an original, like Carlos said, to be excited about the world, to look at the world around us and see all of the different possibilities and strengths and think, these things are good, and I can use them to be better. Carlo learned a secret that everybody has to learn. Love people, use things. I'm going to say that again. Love people, use things. Sometimes we love things too much, and they get in the way of people, and that's not good. That's not good for us. We need to be people for other people. We need to be persons, human persons. One of the early saints, the fathers of the church, said, the glory of God is man fully alive. Carlo was fully alive, and this is why he's so attractive even after his death. Now he's even more alive with Christ in heaven.